The paper I chose for my final paper analysis and my final project for this class is Are Greg and Emily Greg and Emily more employable than Jamal and Lakeisha? And in this paper, it is a field experiment done in which their motivation is to try to find racial discrimination and how much racial discrimination is in our labor markets. Now, they do this by creating a high quality resume, meaning it has previous work experience, volunteering, maybe a certificate from another work or something that you accomplished, and basically anything of that nature that is better than the normal resume. And on the other hand, they have just like an average resume of the average normal person. And they use both of these resumes pretty much. And what they do with these resumes is they have an equal amount of the high quality resumes for both African Americans and whites, and so they will slap a extremely white name like Greg or Emily on one resume, and they will slap a name like an extremely strong African American name like Lakeisha or Jamal onto the exact same resume, and they will send both these resumes into ads that are in the Boston and Chicago newspaper, and they will wait for callbacks for interviews pretty much. And so in doing this, they get results by interpreting how many callbacks they get for the white names comparatively to how many callbacks they get to the African American names. Now, some results from this experiment showed that 50% more of the white applicants and resumes had callbacks rather than the African American resumes, even though they were exactly identical, pretty much. And they also found that even though you may have a higher quality resume, that does not play a factor larger than racial discrimination does. And an example of that is they used the higher quality resumes, again, white name and an African name, sent them both in, and still the white names had a much more significant callback comparatively to the African American names that had callbacks. So to conclude this, they stated that they did find significant discrimination for African Americans in our labor markets. Now, one thing that I felt like really helped me in better understanding when I was doing this paper and when I was reading it, I guess I shouldn't say doing it because I didn't write it, but when I was analyzing this paper and going through it, I felt like one thing that was really beneficial from our class was the previous paper analysis prep stuff that we did leading up to this. For example, I remember when picking out this paper, we had to give a reasoning of why we chose it. And I feel like in doing that, when you have to explain why you chose it and what it means to you, it makes the paper easier to understand because it's something that you actually care about and it's something that is important to you or that you find interesting or you wouldn't have chose it. And another concept that I felt kind of relays into this paper was externalities. That meaning that you either have a negative or positive benefit from either a third party or something going on within your company, business, household, whatever it may be. And you may say, like, how does this really play a factor into that? Well, let's just say, for example, there's an African American salesman. he's going to work. He usually does his job right, does everything he needs to do, but now he's facing discrimination at work. He's being discriminated against, and it's really starting to get to him. Like, it's upsetting him, it's making him angry. And so he goes to another fellow African American that he works with in the same company and expresses his feelings of the discrimination. He says, I'm not happy with this, blah, 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 blah. And the other guy may come back and say, you know what? You're completely right. This isn't fair. This isn't right. You shouldn't be being treated this way. And furthermore, they may then decide to either, one, not work as hard. They may say, if this continues, I'm not going to sell what I need to sell for today. Basically not do what they need to do for their job. And this relates right back to the externalities. If they're not doing what they're supposed to, obviously this is going to cause workflow to decrease and work productivity to decrease, and in turn cause negative externalities within the company. Now, in this research, there was a model that was provided, and in that model, there's 3 variables. There's W, B, actually there's only 2. W being for white callbacks, and B being for the African American callbacks. And pretty much they made a table beginning with equal treatment, meaning it's the exact same amount of resumes sent, and they also took the percentages of the no callbacks. So the model for this section was 1W plus 1B, along with 2W plus 2B, meaning 2 whites plus 2 African Americans. The next was for the African Americans favored percentage in callbacks, and they did this by 1B plus 0W, 2B plus 0W, and 2B plus 1W. Again, African Americans clearly being favored, having the higher number comparatively to the whites in this instance. And then the final part of the table was whites favored and callbacks in the sum of that percentages. And they used 1W plus 0B, 2W plus 0B, and 2W plus 1B. And now what those equations, or models, I guess you could say, did is they would decipher the percentage of African American callbacks, white callbacks, and no callbacks, and they would see what the difference was between what the white callbacks were comparatively to the African American callbacks, and see what that difference was and how much more it was, pretty much. So for my own model, to further this research, it's actually kind of going backwards a little bit, but I still feel like it could be very beneficial and further the research. But it's, before you apply, when you're looking at the ads from the newspaper, maybe pick like 2 to 5 solid companies that you're gonna send these resumes to, obviously, and go in and look at these companies' current employability and the different ethnicities within the employability. And to do that, I created a model with about 6 different variables. A meaning African Americans, W equaling white, O equaling other ethnicities, P1 being the percentage of African Americans, P2 being the percentage of whites, and P3 being the percentage of other ethnicities within the company. So to start this model off, I have A plus W plus 0 equals T, and the variable T stands for total employees. And so then you would take A divided by T, which would equal P1, which is the percentage of African Americans, and then W divided by T, which would be the percentage of white employees, and then you take O divided by T, which equals P3, which is the percentage of other ethnicities within this company. And when you do this, you get to see, before you put in the resumes, before you do anything else, already how much that company is already discriminating, I guess. And you can see which race is dominating that company, so you can put that into your research and show that, it may be bias, but we looked at their percentages before, and they definitely were discriminating African Americans before. We did all this, and it's still showing that they're discriminating African Americans. So I feel like it would just further your evidence and make it even more credible. Now, how do I think this will improve the world, and how will I think it will be beneficial to the world? I think that it would be immense to solve discrimination, or at least tone it down a large bit, because these companies say, it's equal opportunity, but from the study, it's clearly not. And so if you could get past discrimination, it would create not only equal opportunity for everyone, but it would create equal opportunity in the labor markets. I mean, if we're talking about the grand scheme of the world, it's completely unfair for someone else to get a job over someone else just due to their skin color, let alone skin color, name, where they're from, and other things like that were included in this paper. And I think if we get rid of that stigma and get rid of that discrimination, and give equal opportunity to all, it will result in every aspect of life blooming more. There'll be a lot more productivity, I think, from African Americans, even from whites, from Spanish, every other ethnicity. I think you would see a large boom in their productivity if they were just given the equal chance and equal opportunity as every other person.